Hey everybody, and welcome back to Kash's Corner. We have a special announcement. Today's episode is the last episode of Season 7. I can't believe I'm saying that out loud. Thank you so much to our entire audience and fan base for watching the show that Jan and I put together every week with our incredible team at Epoch TV and Epoch Times. We're very appreciative. And we have no better subject to end Season 7 with than, of course, John Durham and his final report and the update on Hunter Biden and what he's been charged with and where the road goes from here. Jan, it's a coin toss. Where do you want to go?
I think let's start with the Hunter Biden plea deal because, at least in part, you seem to have called it back on May 5th that there would be some kind of what many are calling a sweetheart deal.
And the prediction I have made is that I believe Hunter Biden will be charged, and soon. But I think they'll roll it up into what we call this global plea agreement, where he basically gets charged with some Mickey Mouse lower level offenses, walks into a super light sentence, and then they will cover up the cover up.
But it's also not clear to me, and this is where I want to get you to come in here. It's not clear to me, the investigation is ongoing. There might be other charges. I mean, this isn't a done deal, or it certainly doesn't seem that way, and it's certainly a lot of people are saying that. So what do you see happening here?
So, Jan, we did discuss this. We did call this on the show that our audience just saw a clip from. And if I'm being 100% honest, which is what I try to do here, I wish you were telling me how much I got it wrong. Because then I would be able to sit here today and tell you we are restoring our singular system of justice rather than bifurcating it even further. And that, to me, is a sum and substance of what happened with how Hunter Biden was treated by the Department of Justice and FBI and how so many others have been treated. And I hearken back to my days as a federal public defender. I dealt with hundreds of gun charges in federal court for indigent clients, most of whom were minorities, when I was in the Southern District of Florida, down in Miami. And not one time did I ever receive the request to get pretrial diversion, and we'll get to that in a second, for any of my indigent clients charged with a gun crime related to a narcotics issue. Not once. The average sentence for these defendants that I represented was 3 to 5 years in federal prison. And people might be like, wow, that's excessive. Well, when you look at it from a neutral standpoint, that's what Congress intended. Guns and drugs should never go together. And when they do, and you break the law, you should go to prison for a really long time. It kind of makes sense when you simplify it like that. But if you're going to treat everyone differently, or treat a group of people the same, and then one person comes along and you give them a literal get out of jail free pass, that, I think, to me, is a bigger issue than the rest of the Hunter Biden investigation and the tax stuff. And we'll talk about that real quickly. But pretrial diversion. Okay, what is it? This is a kicker for our audience that I think they really need to tune into. Hunter Biden will never be charged in federal court with any gun crime or any crime related to narcotics. That is what pretrial diversion is. It literally means the courts and the judges will never see Hunter Biden on the gun or drug charge. He will be diverted out, and it's a matter that can only be adjudicated by the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General's office. Because you're literally giving him a free pass if the defendant completes certain classes and stays out of trouble and effectively is on probation of the sorts for a period of, I think it's 6 or 12 months, sometimes maybe longer. Then that's it. Then it evaporates. It's like it never was there. So it's not even he goes into court and pleads not guilty, then changes his plea, then he says I'm guilty, then he has a conviction, which would be a felony. He doesn't even have a misdemeanor conviction tied to the gun charge. And so another interesting point is, and I want to put up for the audience, the DOJ manual, which I abided by as a federal prosecutor. I want to talk about the Ashcroft memo in a second, but first I want to talk about pretrial diversion. And it specifically states, I'm summarizing, but our audience can see it, pretrial diversion shall not apply to those offenses involving firearms and brandishing them. Literally, the DOJ's own guidelines say that. So you cannot get pretrial diversion for those crimes. I never did as a public defender for any of my clients who brandished a firearm. I tried, of course, I'm a defense attorney trying to champion for my advocate. But what happened here? Well, there's an exception in that regulation. It says in small writing, unless the Deputy Attorney General himself or herself waives this requirement. That's what happened in this case. Lisa Monaco, the number 2 at the Department of Justice, who helped, in my opinion, launch the Russiagate narrative back in the day, is currently the Deputy Attorney General. The special counsel, or excuse me, in this case, in Hunter's case, it's the U.S. Attorney for Delaware, had to seek approval from the DAG, as we call it, the Deputy Attorney General, Lisa Monaco, to even get pretrial diversion for this type of case because DOJ specifically prohibited it. Well, it's interesting to me that Hunter Biden can get this exception, but none of my clients ever could. And forget my clients, I can't recall ever even hearing about a defendant who had brandished a firearm related to a narcotics issue was given pretrial diversion. So I think, unfortunately, it's a huge loss for our system of justice and rule of law. And I think that's why, to me, out of all the Hunter Biden stuff we're going to talk about, that's the biggest issue, the biggest problem. And this DOJ is going to come around and say, politically, probably something like, look, we prosecuted the president's son, but you really didn't. When you give him pretrial diversion, you're literally saying, I'm not going to prosecute you. And so what are we left with? 2 misdemeanors.
So how is it that, the headlines are saying that he's pleading guilty?
Well,
it's to the misdemeanors.
To the misdemeanors, right. You're correct. So the 2 counts that the government charged him with were 2 misdemeanor counts related to tax fraud and tax evasion. Time out. Remember, the entire IRS team that was investigating Hunter Biden for tax fraud was kicked off the investigation by this Department of Justice. We talked about it on a show some months ago. And a whistleblower came forward, and that's the only reason we know how and why a team who had been working on this case for years from the tax professionals at the IRS was booted. So now DOJ brings the tax case, the criminal tax case. And what they say is, instead of charging Hunter again feloniously with a felony tax evasion charge, they hit him with 2 misdemeanor counts. And that is what he is pleading guilty to per the agreement and the letters that have been made public here. Now, I will caveat, a federal judge has to accept that plea agreement. I don't foresee any federal judge rejecting this agreed upon plea agreement, but we'll see. The federal judge has no say in the pretrial diversion felony gun matter. What they are saying in these 2 misdemeanor counts, one for 2017 and one for 2018, they're saying the same thing. You, Hunter Biden, earned 7 figures in salary, in income, each year. Each year you're supposed to report your taxes and pay them for that 7-figure salary, which each year works out to a large 6-figure amount. People can do the math. And so they're saying he's pleading guilty. They're saying he paid his tax liability. I have an issue with that because, as we've seen, it's been reported that someone in California came in and paid some of Hunter Biden's tax liability at some point. But we're not getting the details on that. But what we do know now is Hunter Biden will plead guilty. And I think for a lot of individuals like myself who worked on fraud cases, tax or otherwise, evasion cases, the first thing I would do as a public defender if I ever saw something like this is report to court tomorrow, refile every case that I've ever had and say, look, this is what the DOJ did to these clients, reduce their sentences immediately. Give my client pretrial diversion. Now, it's a pipe dream because we live in a 2-tier system of justice currently. But that's what Hunter's attorneys have worked out. Now, Hunter Biden's attorney has said he believes this resolves all legal matters that are outstanding. That's pretty big, right? What about Hunter's laptop? What about the stuff in there? What about the bribery stuff? What about the whistleblower? What about the 1023? According to Hunter Biden's attorney, it's game over.